Good evening, Libertarians. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the Executive Director of the Libertarian Party, and it is my great pleasure to be here with the next President of the United States, Dr. Joe Jorgensen. Joe, how's it going?
Going pretty well. A little busy, as I'm sure it is on your end.
A little busy, I can imagine. And if it's Wednesday, it must be Peoria, Honolulu. Where are you today?
Savannah, Georgia, not too far from home. And then on to Minnesota and Iowa, and then Dallas for the big celebration.
You know, it's an interesting thing. You have been in so many more states than your opponents.
Yep.
And I bet that gives you a tremendous insight into what people are actually thinking and saying, because you're talking to real people.
Yep.
What's the impression you get from when you're out campaigning?
That they feel like they've lost control over their lives. And sometimes I do get single issue. I'll hear something about veteran suicide, or I'll hear something about healthcare. But most people are just saying, something's got to give. I got these student loans, and it's taking forever to get a down payment for a house and delaying my family. And people just feel like they've got a loss of a sense of control.
And especially in a time like this, pandemic, et cetera, that must be one of the most frustrating things for people to experience. Now, I tell you, I was going to roll a little longer. I cannot believe these chat messages that are coming in already, how excited people are. And I know that you have some people that you wanted to thank as well, right? There's a list of people that you wanted to, or a few people that you wanted to shout out to.
Yes. In fact, well, I was going to give my little introduction first, but
go ahead.
We've got a donation from Adam B., from Kayla B., and from Dan W.
That's awesome. And, it's one of those things people don't realize, that right at the end of the campaign, there's still a tremendous amount of opportunity for money to really make a difference in the campaign. There's a lot of options in terms of advertising, but also in terms of, being able to hand out literature at polling places. We have the entire Libertarian Party, which, Joe Bishop Henchman was chair of the party, was live the other night, talked about how much the party has grown just in this year since you've been running. And that's been one of your goals as well, right?
That was my campaign promise. And now we won't know until the end, because a lot of people do join after the election. So we'll take a look at the end of the year. But I did want to say thanks to everybody for tuning in. And Steve, who's my campaign manager, Steve Dasbach, we recently got together to review our budgets for our persuasion and get out the vote, because as you know, Dan, get out the vote is really important. And so we've got an end of election goal of $350,000. We have about $201,000 left to raise before the end of the election to pay for these efforts. So that's why we're here on Facebook live stream, both to thank donors for the donations they've given and to hopefully raise a few others. So as you mentioned, our campaign staff is going to update me with names as they roll in. And if you donate $250 or more, I will give you a shout out. I'm not sure how long we're going to be around for, 20 minutes or something like that?
Yeah.
And yep. And also I'm going to take some questions too. So people can email in questions. And yes, you mentioned the comments on the side. My campaign staff is never happy when I read comments on the side, because I'm supposed to be paying more attention, but I'm a little too ADHD to not read them as they come by.
No, I understand that. But I think it's good advice, because, a lot of what's happening right now is people are incredibly invested in your campaign. And one of the interesting things that we get at LPHQ is we get phone calls from all around the country. I don't hear anybody we get a lot of people saying, oh, please, Joe, don't make Trump win. Please, Joe, don't make Biden win. But whenever we get somebody who's calling about you, I love my candidate. I love Dr. Joe. I'm so invested in her campaign. And that's the real difference, I think, is that people who are voting for you are invested.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that we're talking about. And investment, of course, is not just, saying I'm going to vote for you. It's the full commitment.
Yes, it's been really rewarding. People have come up to me and said, you know, it's so nice to be able to vote for somebody. And they're talking about their friends who are voting against somebody. And it's nice to vote for something. Now, of course, what they are voting for is excess government. They're voting against that. But still, they think that I'll be able to handle that. And I will once given the chance. So we've got donations from Rob C., from Jacob B., Patrick M. Patrick is all in capital letters. So if you were Patrick M and it's all in caps, that's you. Zachary E., Santiago B., Matthew M., and Caitlin H.
That's awesome. And it's everybody who's donating right now. We really appreciate it, because this last rush, there's a lot of voters who make up their mind in the week before the election. So you allowing the campaign to have a larger reach right now makes a huge difference. And I know one of the things
sorry to cut you off, Dan, but isn't that amazing that people a week before the election still don't know who they're voting for? I never understood that at all. And especially I don't understand the people who say, well, I don't think Trump's going to win, so I'm not going to go vote for him. Like they're only allowed to vote for somebody who wins. It's like, how about voting for what you believe in? Vote for what you want, not against what you don't want.
100% I agree with that. And I just want to say, future Madam President, you never need to apologize for interrupting me. I want to hear what you have to say. Please, please bring it. You know, one of the things that I think is that you're touching on there is, you know, the people who don't make up their mind until the end for whatever reason, they are some of the people that make it impossible for us to get into the debates. Right? Because whenever they poll them and they say, if the election were today, who would you vote for? And then you know the math, right? Yep. They count against you getting to 15% because they say, I don't know. I'm still making up my mind.
Yep. But you know, it was really exciting. So I did vote yesterday. Yesterday.
Awesome.
And I was standing in line, and I tried not to be too rude, but I was on the phone talking to my sister, telling her about, you know, election night and so forth. And the guy ahead of me turns to me and says, are you by any chance Joe Jorgensen? And I said, yes. And he said, oh, my son's going to be so excited I saw you. Can you take a picture? You know, so I took a picture with him. His son is at Penn State. And then the woman behind me was like, oh, wait a minute. So it's really been amazing. In fact, I went to the post office last week, was getting into my car. Oh, tell you what, let me read some names. I'll keep everybody on the edge of their seat to hear the end of that story. Donations from John A., Anthony M., Nicole V., V as in Victor, Victory, Bradley S., Mitchell M., Joseph Z., and Michael S. So I'm getting out of my car at the post office, and one of the few errands I've run in the last 4 months, by the way. I used to hate running errands. I would give it to my husband to do because now like running an errand is a treat because it's like a short break from the campaign because we've been so busy. But I'm getting out of my car, and a car is driving past me who had been parked at the post office, and he goes, "Are you Joe?" He rolls down the window. "Are you Joe?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he pulls over and has his picture taken with me. I thought, and I was wearing like t-shirt and shorts. It's like the only time in 2 weeks I'm not in my campaign clothes. I thought, how did he even recognize me? So it's just amazing how we're getting the word out there. And that's why we need to raise these funds, of course, to get even more people out there who will recognize the name Libertarian and know that we're the ones who are going to return control to them.
And, one of the things I hear all the time when people talk about your campaign as opposed to the old parties are sort of cults of personality. They're voting for their candidate. But when people say that they're voting Libertarian, they always talk about the ideas that you are talking about on the campaign trail. And one of the things that I've seen that you've talked about that really makes a huge difference is you talk about how, as president, you can bring troops home almost immediately. Can you talk about how that would work?
Yes. Well, first of all, now I don't start off with let's cut the military, because then people think that we're pacifists or that we think we don't need a strong defense. And I certainly don't want to worry anybody. I want people out there to know that they're going to be safer under libertarians, not less safe. And so I start off by saying that I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. And by the way, the reason we say that is because when I used to say, well, I want to bring the troops home, people would say, oh, you're a pacifist, or oh, you're an isolationist. So I put the picture of Switzerland in their heads so that they think, oh, okay, Switzerland. Yeah, they're a banking center. They've got tours going in and out. They're not isolationist. So by putting that picture in their head, then they go, oh, yeah. So I don't just say cut the military. I instead say one giant Switzerland. And by the way, we're in 150 different countries, and we spend more than the next 7 countries combined. And I point out it's making us less safe, not more safe. So before you reply, let me give you some more names if you don't mind. Jess has a whole bunch of them. Thanks to Jess Mears here for helping out so much. Arthur C., Brian M., Bianca E., Richard F., Ann N., donation from Timothy L., Estevan G., and Craig H.
That's awesome. So, one of the things that another popular libertarian, Larry Sharp, who's and he corrected me, you can't say former Marine, because apparently you're always a Marine. He said, people used to say to me, thank you for your service. And it was always a phrase that struck me at rather oddly. And the phrase that I prefer and that he started using is, I'm glad you made it home. And that simple phrase, I think, is so powerful and speaks to what you're talking about.
Yep.
The cost that we've been paying in blood and treasure. So we've talked a little bit about that. I know another one of the ideas that you've been talking about that really has been resonating across the country is the idea that a lot of states, that one of my favorite quotes is that marijuana won more states than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. But there's still that's a true fact. One of my favorite political statistics. But there's still a lot of states that are waging war on drugs, and that has a cost in human lives. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. And again, and this is something I ran on to get the nomination. And I said, you know what? We've got to stop this self-ownership, what's in it for us slant that we've been doing since the 70s. And by the way, let me mention, I'm as guilty as anybody. I was the one who, when I discovered freedom, it's like, oh, this is so great. And I'm walking around talking about how, we should be able to spend our money however we want, and it's our body and we should be able to do what we want. But then voters just say, well, you're selfish. And so they want, they want to know how it's going to help them. And so when I talk about drugs, never once have I said, it's my body, I own it. Never once have I said self-ownership. Never once have I said I should be able to use whatever drug I want to use. All, by the way, which are true. Instead, I'm trying to look at it from a voter's perspective. I'm trying to market our ideas because, by the way, liberty is right and liberty works. And so what I've been asking people is, when's the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going up and down the halls of a high school trying to push in on high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses in order to support a vodka habit? And when's the last time you heard of 2 liquor store owners having a shootout over the best corner? These are not drug problems. These are prohibition problems. So for all the people who say, well, I don't use drugs, I never have, ending the war on drugs doesn't help me any. I say, yes, it does. It's going to make your school safer. It's going to make your street safer. And by the way, wouldn't it be great to find out that the house next to you isn't a meth house? Because now we've got Philip Morris and Seagram's making it, instead of having the profit to where people are out there. Because again, we don't hear about people making bathtub gin. So it's making it safe for everybody.
Right. And one of the things that I think you explain better than almost anybody who's come before is that when we talk about supporting decriminalization, legalization, stuff like that, we're not saying we want people to go out and get high.
Yes.
We're saying we want parents to not be separated from their children. We want, police to not kick down a door, of the wrong house looking for drugs that are questionably in the house or not, stuff like that. And I think you've explained that so much better. One of the other go ahead, Joe. It looks like you're going to say something.
I was just going to say that, and that's one advantage of having a teacher going out and saying the message, because I'm not going out because I don't use illegal drugs. I never have. So I'm not out here saying, it's my body. I'm going out there saying, yeah, like you, I'm a mom, I'm a teacher. Although I do admit that my drug of choice is bourbon, which, by the way, is a lot more dangerous than marijuana. And that just shows that, once again, it's a special interest, just so they have their drug legalized. That's all they care about in Washington. But before I turn it back over to you, just excitedly has some more names here for us. It's Ben H., Chuck W., Chris R., Joseph K., Trevor G., Jill M., Chris H., Nathan T., Michael O., Santo D., and Donald A.
That's awesome. I feel like, and I just want to tell everybody, this is not scripted. We're just having a conversation, but I feel like you're reading my mind because you talked about being a teacher. And I think one of the things that hasn't been talked about a lot is that you're not just a teacher, you are a PhD, and you are actually a trained critical thinker, which differentiates you so much from the other candidates who are running, right? Joe Biden never had an honest job, right? I mean, elected to Senate at 7, I guess.
And never lived under a law he's passed in his life, right?
Exactly.
And that's the other thing I've been pointing out is, we hear the phrase, citizen statesman in school, and we don't think about what it really means. Here's what it really means. You go to Washington, you pass laws for a couple months, then you go home and you live under them. And he doesn't have to do that. But go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, because you're exactly right. It's hypocritical there. And then on the other side of it, we have a president who clearly has so little understanding of science, basic understanding. At one point in time, we talked about things going away. How much of it is, at least for me, you're the smartest candidate to run in my lifetime. And I am grateful for that. I am grateful for the fact that, you are saying it's okay to elect and vote for somebody who really understands how to listen, analyze, and make a decision based on available evidence. And that's part of what, you studied for that. Can you go ahead?
Yes, I am a trained scientist.
Right, exactly. And so, that's one of the things I was going to talk about. So when you got your doctorate, you had to defend your dissertation. And so you've had experience of talking to people when they don't agree with you or they're challenging your ideas and persuading them. And I contrast that with the other two candidates who, if somebody challenges their ideas, go ahead, Joe. You're going to knock this one out of the park.
No, well, not necessarily. You make a great point. They've had sycophants around them their entire lives. They've had are they called yes people now instead of yes men? Sorry. But yeah, all their lives have had people around them telling them what they want to hear instead of what they don't want to hear. And by the way, you mentioned my dissertation defense. I would say that any classroom is much tougher than a dissertation defense because you can ask some very difficult questions sometimes.
Well, I was surprised. I saw you on Fox Business the other day, and Hannity mentioned the fact that you are teaching his son right now, which I gather was a surprise to you as well.
Yeah, and you know what? And yeah, let me interrupt. First of all, what people don't know is I couldn't actually see his face. I'm just looking into a
voice in your ear.
Yep, looking into a camera. Yeah, I hear voices in my head, right? And so it's hard for me to judge when I can cut in, when I can't. Like you, Dan, every now and then I can see your face. So I know, okay, now I can jump in, not be too rude. So what I wanted to say to Neil and what I told him off air later was, I noticed that somebody in my class had the last name Cavuto. And I thought, no, surely it can't be like that. No, that's too big of a coincidence.
It can be, and don't call me Shirley.
Yes.
Sorry, I had to do that joke.
And here it was. Oh, wait, I've got more names. It needs to be brighter. And I've got James D. and Sean O. and Jonathan L. Rachel B. Adam B. Asher W. Glenn L. And by the way, that's Glenn with one N, not two N's. So if you're Glenn L with two N's, we don't have yours yet. Tina H, Cheryl W, James L, and Sean S. And that's Sean spelled S-E-A-N, if you're wondering which one.
It's awesome. I saw scrolling past in the comments too, another donation from our friend Kate P, who you know very well, traveled around. And Kate, we're giving you a big shout out too, because you've done a lot for the campaign. Let me ask you about this thing, because I got a chance to see you on the bus tour with, your group. I sort of was referring to you guys as sort of, the queen in her court. You guys were together, focused. And I'm going to tell a little story. I came up to the Philadelphia rally, and you guys suddenly found out that you had to be in New York the next day. And so you were going to have to take the train. And I brought up my truck, and I'm like, okay, I can pile all the luggage into my truck. And you drove with me over to the train station, and we got there, and I thought to myself, I'm the only man here. How am I going to get all this luggage into the right place? Well, that was just me being stupid, because you and your team, no problem. You cranked that guy out. You guys were so organized. All of a sudden, all the luggage is stacked up, like wheels on top of this thing, on top of that thing. It was unbelievable to see it. And that's one of the interesting things I think about, is that you have all these people working around you to get the campaign where it needs to go, both physically and, electorally. And that's so different from the other candidates, because they're surrounded by people who only care about an election. Right. They only care about that. And so can you talk a little bit about sort of the relationship that you have with the people that you're working with?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're doing something different, not even just different from the Democrats and Republicans, but something different than the 2016 campaign, which is we've got all libertarians on the staff. And what we're trying to do is not just run a campaign, but we're trying to train people to run campaigns in the future. We're trying to show people how it's done. And Jess Mears, who I already mentioned, who's been by my side the entire time, she said that in the last campaign, she'd be working next to a Bernie supporter or somebody else, that basically it's people who, their main goal was a job in politics, and that was their career. However, we've got in our campaign, which I've got to give Steve Dasbach all the credit, because this is him, not me. Steve Dasbach said, nope, we're not going to be a professional campaign, as in we're not going to, run off with the names, run off with the money. We're going to train libertarians for the future. And somebody who had helped me with my campaign earlier, I don't know if you've seen the movie, The Over the Hill Gang, but it was basically, okay, before the old timers are leaving, let's try to impart everything we know onto them so that all of this institutional knowledge doesn't get lost. So it was actually a very deliberate tactic, a deliberate strategy. And so now I look at somebody, I don't want to mention names here, but there was somebody who, somebody was mentioning to me, oh, this person would be, great running another campaign. Actually, I think this person might actually want to be the candidate, so don't want to name names. But anybody on my team, of course, could either be the candidate or work for a campaign again, whatever they liked.
That's really amazing. And, I want to give a shout out too. And for everybody who's still watching, we're talking about the end days of the campaign, but there is a tremendous opportunity ahead of us of things we can reach with a couple more donations along the way. And so, there's been a lot of generous support, but people who want to donate, who can donate again, you are buying materials. You may have heard about all the long lines at the polling places. Well, we have libertarians out there at those lines, and they are putting materials into the hands of voters. That's something that a donation right now helps. Rack cards, we can print them out. We can get them to the polling places on Tuesday. Signs, people can hold them there. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, yeah. We were just in, was it Cincinnati? Where was the state? Was it Cincinnati with Derek? I won't name a last name. The billboard. Toledo. Thank you. Sorry. I got the state right.
You did.
Again, I'm showing my age. If it's Tuesday, this must be Belgium. So in Toledo, there's actually a billboard with my picture near the polling place. And we got to go see that. I had my picture taken near it. And, again, I don't have permission, so I'll just say Derek, last name withheld. Thank you very much, Derek, for your generosity and for not only that billboard, but other billboards as well. And speaking of generosity, notice my little segue. See,
perfect.
I could just take over one of these morning shows or QVC. Dave M, Jeff G, Deborah B, Ryan T, Jace, JC, I'm not sure how to pronounce. I'm going to say JC L, Kyle K, Elizabeth C, Guy M, Mark V, Wilton C, Tony W, that's Tony with an I, if you're wondering if it's you, Roy M, Mark H, Mark with a K, Eric's M, Ethan R, and Christian H.
So, we're getting close to the end of our show. And one of the things I want to talk about is, and I'm going to put you on the spot here because I know it's going to be a little bit of maybe something a little that candidates don't talk about, but there is a toll for being on the road. And you have been a warrior. You have been a warrior for liberty, all the places you've gone, the stuff that you've gone through, but it's time away from your home. It's time away from family. What is it that makes you say, I am willing to give of myself this much?
Well, first of all, I would be lying if I didn't say I didn't enjoy pretty much every minute of it. Maybe, maybe the lack of sleep, not so much, but I'm just so honored that I could represent the party. And every day I'm just so thankful that the delegates put their faith in me, because I got to tell you, it's more hard work than I ever dreamt possible, but it's also more fun than I ever dreamt possible. I mean, this is a once in a lifetime thing, and I'm just so excited. I'm just so happy to have gotten this chance. But yes, it's gotten to the point to where basically my husband just reads my Twitter to see where I am. All he knows is I'm gone, and he reads my Twitter to find out. So, but it's somebody's got to do it. And I really do have a love of my country from my grandmother. Three of my, and I talk about my one grandmother who used to tell me about, the old country. She would tell me about the old country. But three of my grandparents are actually immigrants. And so I would hear stories about the old country and how great it is here. And so I want this America to be the America that my grandparents moved to. And what's ironic, and I've mentioned this in a few interviews, is that on the other side of my family, the Swedish side of my family, my grandfather's family came here for freedom. And yet during the pandemic, their restaurants, schools, shopping, they all stayed open. So how ironic that my family comes here for freedom, land of the free, home of the brave. We're under house arrest, whereas back in Sweden, they're out freely walking around. So that's just rather ironic. And I just want America to be the kind of country it was before they shut down the borders, when people could come here and without a lot of licensing laws, without a lot of government intervention, when people could spend their money, make their own decisions, and start from scratch out of their own home.
I think that is a tremendous place to wrap it up. You hitting home the point that being anti-government is not being anti-American. On the contrary, it's being as pro-American as possible. I'll throw it back to you, Joe. I don't know if you have any more.
Yes,
names.
I've got three more names. Four more. Zach R, Nathaniel O, Dylan B, and William D. And yes, I absolutely love my country, and that's why I'm doing this, because if we're turned over to the socialists, then where are people going to go for freedom? So our last stance here, we got to turn things around.
That's awesome. To everybody who's been watching, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention to our political state. Thank you for supporting Dr. Jorgensen. It is the burden of our lifetimes to create a country that is more free. And we have been blessed with a candidate that represents that.
Thank you.
Dr. Jorgensen, thank you so much for your time. And I bid you a good night.
Thank you.